the internet community for suing Ethan and Ela Klein, aka H3 Productions, over a reaction video they made on their second channel known as The Big, The Bold, The Beautiful, in which they delivered their signature reaction-style commentary. When I was a very small commentator, I made a little video called Matt Hoss Could Win, in which I expressed my feelings on the whole lawsuit and how in fact he could be successful. At the time, fair use was still a very untested concept, and there have been cases in the past where creators had lost against claimants. So I was especially skeptical of how some out-of-touch court might handle the case. I think it was a justified concern, and at the end of the video, your sister snapped and went off on a memorable rant that today would make such a typically placid individual like myself cringe. That video was really the first taste of any success I had, as it amassed approximately 50,000 views at the time, and I was pretty excited. I mean, what would this spell for an aspiring commentator like myself? Well, basically nothing for another year, as all my videos afterwards didn't do much. But I guess today, like Chris Martin once said, we're going back to the start, because I do find Matt Hoss a fascinating bloke. Matt Hoss's channel is known as the Matt Hoss Zone. He did used to have an Instagram, but that's gone, and he's been relatively inactive on all platforms bar the occasional appearance on Facebook where he expresses his distaste of Donald Trump, and promises his inevitable return to the followers who are eagerly awaiting another masterpiece from the maestro himself. As a creator, he is fairly established, running on the platform for a few years with a fairly respectable backlog of content. His description reads original comedy, action, horror, and fantasy short films with electronic dance music from the mind of Matt Hosseinzadeh. Hosseinzadeh being his full last name, which you know he has mercifully shortened, so I appreciate that. It's probably going to knock around 10 minutes off this video. The original comedy, action, horror, and fantasy short films were a mix of him picking up girls with his mad parkour with some vampires thrown in there. I mean, that's a simplification, but I think a lot of people tend to look at his content as Matt. There is no other way to describe his channel other than it's Matt Hoss. Unfiltered Matt Hoss. Like The Room was unfiltered Tommy Wiseau, but I'm not so sure about that. This is where H3 are introduced. Most people know how the story goes, that basically Matt filed a civil action against H3 under the premise that their use of content wasn't fair and defamed his character. H3 disputed this, and this then escalated to the courts. Fortunately, this time round, the judge then, Catherine Forrest, the absolute legend, ruled in favor of the Kleins. It was probably one of the most famous motions, and it was heartwarming to see an often divided community uniting for the cause of something that transcended the differences. Matt Hoss, the man at the center of this lawsuit, became the sort of Disney villain of YouTube. He himself was a content creator, and thus the lawsuit felt very personal. I spoke about this in my Smosh video, but often when businesses file lawsuits, there is a lack of accountability. We'll hate the business, but they have no personality to hone in on. They have no face to lambast. Matt Hoss put himself at the front and center of the controversy, and there were very few people who were willing to defend him. He didn't set himself out there as a likable character. He often came across as highly egocentric and narcissistic, and people tended to hone in on this. People hated him for it, and when videos came out, they were very critical of Matt Hoss in the moment, but no one really asked why he did it. And in a way, when the situation is transpiring, I wouldn't expect people to. The stakes seem very high, and theorizing over motivations when they weren't exactly relevant to the outcome seemed unnecessary. But I feel like now that time has passed and we're all on the tubes, chilling, like the fellow kids we are, I feel like maybe we do have time for a discussion, because as said, I really do find the character of Hoss a very captivating one. I think many people at the time just saw him as this delusional reactionary, completely high off his own hubris, and with this image in his head that he was under personal attack. And you know, when you look at the evidence, it's 100% credible, and one that I even may agree with to an extent. But I want to have a discussion because I think there was a level of calculation that many people do not pay attention to, and I want to watch his videos so we can perhaps understand the mind and motivations of Matt Hoss. I'm someone who likes to find rationale and logic in everything, and although I accept that it's not always the case, it's hard to believe that in spite of these slightly blurred lines of fair use, that Matt Hoss would end up likely throwing copious amounts of money away to protect some semblance of personal reputation, which he tried to reflect in his rhetoric. That makes very little sense to me, and I want to see if we can find an alternative explanation. There are a lot of details pre and post lawsuit that I think can perhaps case, it is very different to the one we assume as truth, and I hope maybe I can provide a new take to an old situation. But to do that, we have to cut the crap and enter the Matt Hoss zone, which is a zone like no other, so I suggest we light up the fuse, burn it up, because at the right opinion, we go hard and never go home. Ready, set, go.
Baby! Coming! Alexa, turn down the thermostat.
Okay, turning down thermostat. Ready? Huh. Here we go.
What do you think people did before Alexa?
Alexa, turn the temperature down 2 degrees.
Thank you, dear.
Alexa, tell me a joke.
Jokes. God, what do you think I know loads? Look at me.
Next.
News! Get your news here!
Alex, what's today's news?
Doesn't matter, it's all fake.
Oh, cool. I got fucking pranked.
Play that song I like.
Wait a minute.
Al? Next song.
Dude, I swear to God, this fucking ad.
Alexei?
Shut up.
The Matt Hoss character is a very interesting one, and one that does seem to be pretty consistent throughout his content. Apart from these social commentaries, which is another barrel of fish that we'll have to knock over in a bit. What happens is that you have this protagonist, namely our hero, Daddy Matt here, bold guy typically, and what we see is him swooping in on this girl, the alpha male that he is. Often this girl will play hard to get, be difficult, and not comply with Hoss's obvious advances. However, you see Matt Hoss isn't easily defeated and will persist until he has the female. The first video that he has up is a video known as Flirt. He did have one up before that was called In Blood, however, it has been taken down. One can assume that that was more of the horror-themed content that he was looking at. And Flirt is much more to a formula. Hoss moves in, girl says no, Matt Hoss translates as yes, and goes at it until she gives in to his manly charms.
Okay, this is gonna sound strange. When I first saw you, I got this incredible urge to pin you down.
What the
pour
fuck?
A gallon of boiling water down your throat.
See, where me and H3 disagree is I don't think Matt Hoss is some old school fringe tuber. I think he's one of those corners of the internet that people say they've been to once and come back from and aren't really interested in checking it out a second time. It seems like it once again appeals to a select set of people who are looking to fulfill their position of being able to place themselves as the protagonist and live out their dreams of picking up a girl by telling her that basically they want to bore them. That's what this is, dressed up vor. The thing is that on one hand this presents the delusion that many people associated Hoss with. Many people saw Hoss as someone trying to basically express himself through content in unrealistic situations. But equally this could just be a clever appeal to the audience in my opinion. Hoss makes the very interesting directorial decision to make the girl's responses fairly realistic most of the time. That rather than just to have her immediately jump on his dick, which would say to me something much more about self-gratification. Like many rational people, the subject of his video typically becomes very uncomfortable and asks him to go away, continuously, insults him, seems absolutely disgusted like any reasonable person would, and yet at the end of it suddenly has this incredible epiphany and decides that actually this guy who has continuously insinuated to sexually beating you to a pulp and removing various body parts might just be the man of her dreams. Now when he first started out, he had these sorts of art house titles such as Flirt and the highly anticipated sequel, Flirt 2. His thumbnails were pretty clickbaity and they involved the famed female, which, you know, is always a good method to attract attention. These videos were performing all right.
I'm gonna pause that for a little bit. Alright, so I saw one guy said, oh, the beach of Bermuda is copying the Isle in every fucking way, and there's nothing unique about it besides it just being survival. But I mean, that he stole from the Isle. Like the thing about Beast of Bermuda and like the uniqueness of it is that it brings talents, and that just gives like buffs and certain skill trees accessible, you know, just like that. That's what makes Beast of Bermuda unique, is that the Isle doesn't have talents. Not now, and I don't think they have confirmed it, period. So, checkmate, loser. Get outclassed. But I mean, if you use Insomnia as like a go-to source for your information when making a decision when buying a game, off topic by the way, you're probably a degenerate. I guarantee you're a degenerate if you just rely on Insomnia's word of advice. Like, you do not, just don't stop. He makes bad calls, but I'm gonna go back to my video. So.
For his channel size, but it wasn't until a significant change in these videos that they began to catch fire, which was the titles. Suddenly the videos were not just flirt or flirt 2, they were videos that depicted occurrences in the present tense, which are always naturally more clickbaity and played off the double meaning of a quote, bold guy. These videos really picked up, often accumulating hundreds of thousands of views. Another couple details that I found interesting was how his original description read short films from my twisted brain, and there were videos that were which looked like they didn't actually include him. Also, massive delays in HD. Hope that Minecraft channel takes off. And so the question becomes, why did he remove those videos? I mean, it wasn't views, as they seemed to be comparatively doing alright. So I suppose we could say that he wanted to make his channel more about his characters and narratively coherent. And I can understand why that may motivate him to remove those videos, but the videos he removed showed a difference in creativity, some sort of disconnect between the artist and the art, and that's what I find interesting.
I don't know how to fish.
It's clear that Hoss took the
food.
decision to see Matt Hoss' zone as more integral to himself as the person, but when he started it out, when he conceptualized it, he didn't look at it that way. It begs the question, how much self-awareness was actually there? Was there more self-awareness than we typically assume? And if so, why would he present the content as lacking so much self-awareness, supposedly? Well, let's put these ideas on hold and move forward. With the removal of content that we assume he considered irrelevant to the progress of his channel, this left him with two key series, Bald Guy and Horny Tony. Bald Guy was known for his hilarity, charisma, and boldness, and Horny Tony was known, well, for his horniness. Both of these brands have serious sexual undercurrents, and it's certainly not the sort of films you'd view on primetime television. And it's quite amazing that his character hasn't been #MeToo'd yet. Basically, it seems like content tailored for incels. The idea that somehow you can be just absolutely strange and repulsive and somehow end up with the girl. And that's what has been confusing me. Matt Hoss writes the characters around him as completely aware of that. And yet every time he seems to end up winning the girl, sending a very mixed message to his audience. It seems like some psychological tactic to present some very deluded part of the viewership with this unrealistic character to hold on to. I think Matt Hoss is 100% aware of his character's unlikability. However, when we make short films like Matt Hoss does, we don't expect them to be character representations of ourselves. And yet everyone assumed his characters, like Bald Guy, to be just that. Mainly because he often seemed to aggrandize the character in a way that would somewhat represent that delusion, using words in his description such as cool and funny. Cool and funny, Bald Guy doing epic hardcore. This was your protagonist, but at the same time, there was such an awareness of how transparently terrible he was. I can only think that he was trying to appeal to a set of individuals who were also that terrible and looking for some sort of creation of a fantasy where their crude behavior is actually successful. I feel Hoss was originally distant from the characters and demonstrated that through their old content, and I think this shows a different perspective from a lot of the narratives created. And I want to explain in the next part why I think this has greater implications for the lawsuits.
So I just downloaded the free browser extension Honey, and I'm gonna see how much money I can save with it in 24
I don't want to hear that. I don't want to hear that. Not my video, not my ad.
Yes, we are being sued for copyright infringement.
In one of his videos about the lawsuit, Hoss says that he doesn't care about the hate, and in fact, he lives to thrive off the animosity.
Despite the enemy's propaganda, I don't care about criticism or approval regarding how I conduct my business. Not only do I not care, I am proud to stand up against massive, misguided opposition to fight for my rights and the rights of artists everywhere.
I feel this isn't entirely true. I think on one hand, sure, he loves the attention that the whole situation gave him, but on the other hand, there was something deeply harmful about the incident that really vexed him, which is what compelled him to launch the lawsuit in the first place. I feel like many of us can agree on that. However, I think for me the false assumption came that people assumed he launched the lawsuit because he represented himself in his characters, and therefore felt he was personally under attack. After all, on one hand, I think that's where the whole defamation was introduced, but personally I think that was more of a legal tactic to try and strengthen a case which was kind of weak. By putting himself out there, exposing himself to all that negativity, and then using that negativity to strengthen the persecution in his case. However, at some point he completely filtered his comments, not in a way where you would have to wait for some admin approval to post. Just 99% of the comments are gone, with a few remaining. This says to me that he might be making a return quite soon. You see, I think his content relied on a clear image being portrayed to a specific demographic. And here's the thing, it's clear that Hoss was no stranger to hate. The ratings for his videos, while he still had them enabled, painted a fairly polarizing picture. But there was clearly something. And I'm sure many people attacked him personally in the past, and some of those comments are still there. So there must be something unique about the H3 video, which, you know, you have to understand H3 to know what they can do with their brand. The clients and their reaction.
Farming. So I remember I just watched an interview with Deathly Rage, because I had to do an assignment based on interviewing a game developer. It's not like necessarily like you have to look at game developers. You could choose anyone to interview, like from a different culture than you and all that. Not necessarily culture as like you might think of, like, you know, Indians or Russians or whatever. More of like culture as of like gaming culture, game developers, chefs, whatever. There's different communities. Ethnography or some shit like that. Or so you kind of take a look at a different community and see how things are, and yeah. I chose game developers since I'm not really in it. I play their games, but that doesn't mean by any means that I'm part of their group or familiar with their group. So I asked if I could like interview Deathly or Jiggy or any dev from the Path of Titans. At the moment they're too busy, so nothing against them. I completely understand. So I'm kind of like farming research from other interviews, right? So I was watching this one, and it was talking about like Deathly mentioned that usually with survival games, he was inferring the Isle, is that you have a lot of you get all this stuff, you get all this progress, and you die and you lose it all. Which, I mean, I'm pretty sure all of us have ran into it. I mean, I watched one of my videos of the Isle progression a while ago, like a long time ago, during when I was trying to make everything kid-friendly and categorizing all my videos. And I found that video where I fucking lagged when I was running away from an owl source and I got fucking bitten for some bullshit ass reason. Yeah, it's just so fucking frustrating that you got all this progress, but you fucking lose it, and you get that frustrated. So with Deathly, he says, I wanted to make a game that had that kind of feeling, but is less painful as those kind of games are, where you lose everything, all your progress. Which, I mean, it could go back and forth. Jesus Christ, my retarded friend, back at it again. He's probably gonna call me or something. Alright. So, it's more of like you earn skins and shit like that. You don't necessarily lose anything. Of course, it might be a little bit, like, configured a little bit. I don't actually know. Of course, we haven't seen Path of Titans full force yet, so it could be completely different. But I mean, the idea is there. Oh, fuck. So, I really do think it's a little bit too anger-inducing, because I definitely did mention it was just kind of like, it's less fun, and it's more of like, you're anxious all the time, and he's like, I want that feeling, but not as harsh, not as intense. It's like, yeah, I agree. I don't want that shit to happen. Like, it pissed me off. So. Aqua Affinity. Dude, thank God. That's actually useful. So, yeah, I'm actually interested in what he's doing with the Path of Titans at the moment, to be honest. And I did hear that it was pushed back, like the release. Both releases, pre-release and actual release, was pushed back a bit just for extra content and for it to be completely polished. I say completely lightly, because of course, you know, games are not going to be completely polished, if you get my drift. There are going to be problems, there are going to be bugs, and fucking thank God. Water. I can't believe I haven't found anyone yet. Oh, it's flooding. Why can't I drink? Oh, bruh. Of course it fucking is. Wow, the fucking delusion. Wow, that's kind of descriptive. Almost at all. Fuck. I'm gonna lose that. As you bite. Bruh. Oh, I didn't realize it was that complex. That's why I like fucking hold Q on every fucking fish. It's like epic. Alright, now we just gotta find the fish. I think I'm getting some sort of hang on this, but I just don't know where I could find the fish. Am I hitting a Moza or something? psychos in this game. Psycho funny funny. Oh. Almost. All right. Call, aggressive roar, submissive, distress call. Oh, that's just a call. Then I thought that was a friendly. Bruh. What do you mean? Look up. What? Left alt. Smell. You. Okay. I have no idea what that means. So you. Oh, there they are. Huh. I actually really like that now, just knowing that exists. Holy fuck. I actually, you know what, playing this makes me want to play the Isle, just to see. I think I'm getting a good idea. Oh, okay. Where you at, cuz? Weren't they in this direction? Like, you gotta fucking not move. They're so small and it pisses me off. I don't like just seeing it through the walls, though, to be honest. I actually want to just see it. Like, I want to see it visibly when I'm sniffing. Like, I don't want to have this some sort of dumb fucking they had to look through a, like, have some sort of wall in front of you to see it. And it angers me a bit. You're fucking me right now. God for flooding. Christ, I can travel faster. Only problem is that what if, right? There's a Moza around for some fuck all reason, just to be there. Just an idea. Alright, they're in that direction. I'm just ready to fucking go find some random ass dinosaur and fucking kill it. No. Yeah. You know what? What the fuck? Was that, like, right next to me? Jesus Christ. KOS, what the fuck? Ban the lightning. Almost saddle. T. Cleanliness. Actually, that's fucking godly. I actually don't even get to sing. You. Where you at? Alright, I know those fish are just fucking pranking me, so I'm just gonna find a different water hole and find them that way. I would think playing as Flash would be easy, but I mean, like the deal is, how are you gonna scavenge? That's like the big deal, I think. It's like, you need a big guy to kill guys for you. But you can't get food otherwise. Yeah, I think like, they need to add that smaller reward, so it's kinda like, it has like a little even balance, you know? Okay, we need more flood. I can't see anything. I got fucking scared. Like, I actually have no idea how to deal with stress. I found where they live, I think. There. Alright, they're more abundant and more visible. I think it's actually more of they're just a different water source and it just detects it in a way. I think that's a big problem. Or like but I'm desperate need food at the moment. Okay, they're in that direction. Where are you at, guys? Bruh. Oh, I'm dying. I think it's just because I'm stressed. That's the thing. Like, I have no idea how stress works. I think I wish there was a tutorial, so it just kind of teaches you the basics. Like, what does the fucking yellow shit mean? Like, the yellow skeleton. Like, does it have any special meaning, or it's just there for aesthetics? Okay, we should be coming on the fish pretty soon. Yeah, there they are. Okay, is there anything near me? Food. Saved. Must eat. Actually, I think it's starvation is the thing. Probably go with another few fish. Okay, I think I'm good. Oh, I'm not adult yet? I thought I was. Alright, I'm gonna try to calm myself down. I think that's the issue. Like, my character is fucking out a bit. Just really upset. Alright. I'm actually kind of enjoying this game. I don't know, I ain't telling me those bitches. I do agree though, it needs to be polished. Like when I was trying to start my host server to do the new Megalo sound. Well, not sound, more like a remodel animation rework. And yeah. Like there's only like there's like 3 mode slots, but all of them set free roam. And I think that needs some work, but generally this game needs more polish. And I think instead of fucking shitting on the game for no fucking reason, how about we just fucking say, hey, I found this fucking bug, and reporting to the fucking devs, or putting it, just write shit down. You know, spend like 2 hours and literally write down problems and issues and bugs that you find and give it to the devs. I don't understand how complicated that is. Like, how's that complicated? I don't understand. But I mean, everyone likes to jump on the fucking bandwagon. Oh, I'm not in it. I can't do it. Shut the fuck up, actually. You're just very cringy, to be honest. Alright, yeah, I think it's more I need to rest. That's just what that circle means, is I just need to rest and be okay. It's not gonna be like one of those games where you're just gonna be fucking perfectly fine, running forever and not rest. I actually kinda like that feature a little bit. I'm just growling. Holy fuck, I'm just seeing my textures go up and up. Oh, I grew again. Yeah, I'm gonna do the Saurian sounds for the Dakota, but I kinda wanna just fucking make them all at once and just upload them all. And like the deal is, there's not a lot of sound effects, or I guess roars for the Isle, or Saurian. It's kinda like lackluster. Unless I need to check the controls on the new things. But I haven't really seen any extra roar besides the F, I think? And that's it. Other than that, the game is laggy and it's going to be unbearable to play. And I have to watch out for other animals that are just fucking walking around. And that's going to be a pain. To be honest, it's going to be a pain. Talents. Only have 3. That's it. Epic. For carnivores, non-player carcasses will now drain small amounts of citation. Also reduce discomfort. I don't mind discomfort. Decreases the rate in which you lose the value. That's action. Good though. On a plane tablet. Hydration level. Play as Rex just to see the experience of it, but I'm not too sure if I have any skins that are like okay for I kinda wanna see the things over here. I'm not adult yet, bruh. yeah, I should probably listen to the video right now.
Videos have a way of impacting how certain characters are viewed by an audience. The thing about Bold Guy is that you view his videos in the context of his art and that creative output. Ethan video in that sense, and they had every right to. However, they took it out of the world that Hoss wanted it to be shown in, and in my opinion, this is what concerned Hoss the most. He had an idea of how his audience was viewing his character. The fact that his appeal of his content had been swayed in a different direction was what caught his eye. Many people thought Hoss saw their portrayal as an affront to him, but I think he was concerned about the greater popular implications that followed the video, for the character that he himself was not greatly invested. You see, with their reaction video, I think what threatened Hoss above all was the implications from being memed by Ethan and Ela. The idea that the brand he created so finally was under threat. You see, there are huge implications from being memed. Not only does it completely shift a public perception of something that you may be taking seriously, but if you can't transcend the meme, then you know you're running on borrowed time. Memes become boring. If you cannot redefine yourself there, then you will get lost in the vault. Many people are under the impression that the Ethan and Ela situation was the first time that he tried to silence someone over such pretenses. But in fact, I reached out to one of the actresses in his video who was under a similar predicament, Anika Reitman. She told me that Hoss refused to let her use any of the content, not even for an acting reel, despite the fact that she testified that they had collaborated heavily on each part of the process and it was part of the agreement for her participation. She tried to upload this acting reel onto her channel and he had her channel suspended, and even threatened to take her to court. Sounds eerily similar, doesn't it? She even posted a comment on the video 5 years ago, well before the H3 situation. On top of this, she also said how, although she found Matt to be a fairly unpleasant person, he wasn't the awkward quirk that he often depicted in his work, and that there was a degree of separation from himself and the character in the presentation, although not in their goal, as Matt was quick to offer to take her out after shooting. On top of this, Anika also believed the character that Hoss created was made to appeal to a demographic, a very specific one that she herself claimed to receive flack from. I believe that with this knowledge we can apply and create a theory that suggests Matt was quite aware of the sort of content that he was making, and upon realizing the potential, sought to protect its image at all costs, whether it was attacking larger YouTubers or even the people who worked with him and actually gave him their time. So we bring this back to Ethan and Ela's content. What it did was basically turn Hoss's video into a bit of a joke, and that annoyed him. We can all agree on that, but in my opinion he wasn't annoyed because it personally insulted him, but because it put his content into a box where its shelf life had been cut criminally short. In my opinion, he wanted these videos to do well for the right reasons, and he knew that when Ethan and Ela uploaded their video, those reasons were evaporating rather quickly. In the tone of what he created following the filing of the lawsuit, it almost portrayed this guy who was deeply insecure in what he was creating, and someone who viewed themselves as under attack, when really the lawsuit, in my opinion, was a tactical move. I think he was completely aware of his character, but he knew there was a demographic for it. The thing is, the internet brings together those sorts of people. Matt wanted to create a world where the creepy, awkward weirdo wins the girl, and when Ethan and Ela were in a very different narrative, he knew that the brand was on borrowed time, that he'd become some kind of ironic joke. So here we are, we have H3 creating a mockery out of the content that you love, and Hoss, legally speaking, is up against it. In a way, fair use is considered to be a prevailing thing, and H3 isn't your everyday creator. You can't just strike down the channel without anyone noticing. So he had to stop H3, or perhaps sacrifice everything that he had worked for, from his perspective at least. And this is where we address the lawsuits.
Meet Lucille. She just got the free browser extension Honey and is on a challenge to see how much money she can save in just 24 hours.
First, I gotta get that new phone. That's my phone. New phone, check. Okay, now definitely gonna book a hotel for our next vacation. Booking.com.
Yeah, it goes right next to that little rock.
Done. Whoa, 20% off. Pizza?
I don't want to listen to this ad.
Add the browser extension.
The lawsuit itself was handled very interestingly by Hoss. See, he went in with an offer which included the clause that they never talk about him again, and he asked for the total of $3,750, which, you know, although is substantial money, in my opinion, Hoss considered that amount to be the sort of money that H3 might compromise on, and the money itself was probably for damage to what he considered to be his brand's reputation. Another point that I believe helps with the additional compromise that he offered, as shown in H3's clip here.
He said, okay, listen, you don't have to pay us the money. You don't have to accept guilt. All you need to do is make a video on your main channel promoting Bold Guy, talking about how you respect him as a creator, apologizing for using too much of his content, post it on all of your social medias for 2 months. For 2 months, underline for 2 months. We counted it, guys. 2 months is legit. We need 2 months from you. Okay, can we get 2 months? Can we get 2 months from you?
And share a few of his other videos.
Share several of his videos.
Yeah.
He clearly went into this under the impression that it wouldn't have to be taken to court. H3 made the point that setting the standards was the concern, but Hoss himself wasn't interested in that. He was interested in preservation. Ethan and Ela said that they had already promoted his content, and that was true, but that's the thing. They had promoted it in a way that had contradicted what it stood for. Ethan and Ela, when they were watching that content, and many viewers, assumed that it was just some guy doing wacky parkour, out in his own little world. But what they'd actually done was very different intentions for what they had interpreted. This message that I personally think Hoss promoted in the videos about the creepy guy getting the girl, although seemingly obvious, was often one that was somewhat subliminal, and its appeal to the audience relied on them not outwardly acknowledging their interests. And therefore having a pair of comedians explicitly interpret it in a completely different way undermined that slight message that Hoss was trying to push, and therefore by retaining the serious credibility of his content in a promotion by H3 that would have been very different to their original video, he would have been able to continue making what he wanted to, rather than being a laughingstock. With that said, if H3 had made that promotional video, I think it would have been rather embarrassing for Hoss given the response, and I think he misinterpreted how people may have responded to that. You see, many people see Hoss as a reactionary who lashed out, and make no mistake, he probably has that side to him, but at the same time, the lawsuit itself was very calculated, and clearly represented what he thought was a threat to his own content and interpretation. Now, as mentioned earlier, Hoss was the face of the lawsuit, and that's a probably wasn't going to be resolved in the initial stage. He switched game plan. One very interesting incident was this one, as documented by Ethan and Ela.
Also worth mentioning, that was particularly obnoxious, is that while we were in negotiations for everything, that one night when he was just real angry and bitter, he, on our privated video that was already removed, I guess he still had the URL, and he did a strike, he did a takedown on our video when we were in good faith negotiation just because he wanted to buff us.
However, I personally find it rather implausible that Hoss just flew into some spontaneous rage and struck the video. I much more find it plausible that he did that with the intention to provoke backlash onto himself, so that he would subsequently receive hate from angry H3 fans, which he would then use to fuel his case, firstly in his own content, and subsequently as reflected in the lawsuit itself.
I'm impressed. If you look at the numbers, those are 2 very successful hashtags. You didn't spell my name on one of them though. That could hurt you when they search for the hashtag.
Hoss was completely aware of the court's ignorance of most of the internet culture, and I think he realized that if he could paint himself to be a victim of harassment convincingly enough, he would be able to prove a point that his character had been defamed, as by proof he was receiving so much hate, and by documenting the success of the comments and their vitriol, he could then use them as a case going forward. Hoss was always up against it, and I think he knew that, but I feel like he didn't want to back down, that he wanted to keep on that notion that he always wins, the fact that he always got the girl, and therefore by striking the video, a seemingly inconsequential act, he had it documented and riled up the people, H3 included. He was prepared for that hate, and he used it to his advantage. He followed the extreme hate comment video up with another video specifically addressing the situation and branding basically everyone who was against him as liars. He knew people hated him, but equally he knew that the courts wouldn't really care about his reputation. Hoss saw this as an all-or-nothing moment. Either he ends up being the walking parkour meme that H3 made him out to be and be confined within that narrative, or end their careers and scare away future commentators. With that said, I think he really passed the point of no return after initiating the lawsuit, and who knows how the public would have responded if he'd won the case. But either way, he wanted to finish what he started. You see, this is where Hoss welded the ideas of the character and himself together, overtly for the first time. So when he was attacked, he turned it into this personal issue, and thus used the attacks against him as evidence. He suddenly switched to commentary content, which is naturally more personal, and tried to walk this very weird line of connecting his on-screen persona with his personality.
The one I'm voting for is Jill Stein of the Green Party. I mean, come on, if you're a straight male or a lesbian and you're looking for a gilf, Jill's the one you want.
Even in ways that made very little sense and didn't link up to how other people had viewed him before. H3 themselves, despite understanding the difference between fiction and reality, as expressed in many videos, such as their recent one on Seinfeld, decided by assumption that Bald Guy's personality represented Matt Hoss. But it didn't necessarily. Bald Guy just represented a character from a film, a short film from the Twisted Minds. What you'll find interesting now is how, in spite of loving the hate at the time, Hoss has now removed basically all comments and is clearly very carefully vetting the sections on how he is presented, particularly on his newer videos. They all have exceptionally low numbers of comments, and Hoss hasn't actually put an approval filter on it. No, he just removed 99% of comments. I know this because I tested it by leaving a comment, and it immediately went up, and he then favorited it. Cheers, Matt. He's clearly very eager to move forward with his channel and distance himself from the image portrayed by H3's content. And in my opinion, the hanging legacy over it all is the reason why he's probably delayed uploading again. This mattered much more than just but Hoss lashed out again. In my opinion, Hoss is a calculated individual. From the first days of his content, he brand identifiable with a certain demographic and to appeal to a specific audience through that very specific branding. Something that the sporadic online personality that people often framed him as wouldn't do. If he was a Tommy Wiseau,
oh hi Mark,
like fully in that sense, he wouldn't have necessarily cared whether that content was marketable or not. But he did. He always set up a very specific character arc and not one that necessarily reflected him as a person. The threat H3 posed was not that it threatened the perception of him as a person, because although he certainly is a character, Bald Guy was not Matt Hoss. No, it was because it threatened the perception of his brand, one that he had fine-tuned to cast to a particular group of people, in my opinion, perhaps incels even, and his response was not one of reflex, but one that would seek to preserve that established reputation as much as possible, which unfortunately for him, H3 called him out on, publicized the incident further, and likely pushed that reputation over the edge. But even at that point, it didn't stop him from trying a few tricks and making it look like a personal attack by changing up his content and integrating it very uncomfortably. Unfortunately, these tactics were futile when it came down to the matter of law. Whether he'll be able to bring back that audience with all this legacy hanging over him is another question. But I believe he's a big underestimating people's calculated nature is something we should never do. Matt Hoss is a shark in the water waiting to strike. I feel that maybe during the situation people were paying more attention to that. This isn't to say I think Matt Hoss is a genius, far from it, but I find the portrayal of him as this some sort of clumsy and reactionary villain, one that is a bit inaccurate. Reflected in the lawsuit, I see it as much more of a calculated power play. One where he wanted to show himself as the guy who wins in the end. People who wanted him to win to show that he is the guy who perhaps undermining his whole reputation. I mean, can you see him doing political commentary?
And that's what Republicans and Democrats are. Two different flavors of the same thing. What we need is at least a third option. Like a pineapple.
Ah, neat. Just don't put that on a pizza.
I think he's retarded.
So that was the video. A lot of hard work into this one. Love to hear your thoughts on it. Matt Hoss's motivations are really unclear. And honestly, the aim of this video was just to present an alternative perspective. It's not one that I necessarily think is correct, but I thought it was a really interesting angle to take it, and I would love to hear what people think about his motivations in the comments below. On top of that, I want to give a big shout out to the editors. They have done a fantastic job. I'm going to leave their links in the pinned comment. Go and check them out. Also, a big shout out to my Patreons, some of them on screen right now. Lovely, lovely people. Thank you so much. And a special thanks to Ryan, you beautiful man. You are insane. I don't know why you do it, but you do it for me, and that's what matters. As an extra here, I have to give a shout out to the donation to my Patreon. Once again, incredibly generous. I really appreciate it, my friends. I really appreciate it. My throat is still dying. If you want to speak to me about this, Twitter, at The Right Opinion, Facebook, Discord, they work too. You know, whatever tickles your fancy. I don't really have too much else to say. I'm pretty knackered as it is, but I hope you enjoyed the video, and I hope it provided something a bit more spicy, because I wanted to do something a bit more different this time, and it was a hard one. It was a hard theory to put forward, especially when you're dealing with a lot of hypotheticals. But something about Matt Potts always did just kind of throw me off about his character presentations, which I think present an ulterior motivation. But we can have that discussion another time. Until then, I'm The Right Opinion, and I will see you in the next one. When people look back on YouTubers and ask themselves who have been the most influential creators on the platform, there are many individuals that I'm sure come to mind. People who are relevant now, and people who used to be relevant. Whether it's PewDiePie, Smosh, Shane Dawson, Nigahiga, Ray William Johnson, Fred, the annoying Orange, and so on. Many creators, past and present, have had a significant cultural impact. However, when speaking to people about their childhood, one name that seldom seems to come up is Toby Turner, or Tobuscus, or Toby Games, despite the fact that I'm sure a huge number of people have watched at least one video of his. Two of his channels have amassed over 6 million subscribers each, which is certainly a feat not to be overlooked. Yet I feel that his story is one that is heavily integrated in the culture that we discussed today, and one that we can perhaps learn a bit from, and maybe seek to explain how Toby Turner ended his career. Hello ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to The Right Opinion, the home of a twat with too much free time, and bless your face. Toby Turner is. But for a basic rundown, he is one of the original creators on the platform, who began his craft in 2006 and 12 years later is still going. As mentioned, however, it's not with the intensity that he used to, after he probably made a fat stack of cash in his time, or at least enough to keep him going. I can't look into a man's bank account. He ascended to his peak around the turn of the 2010s, particularly encompassed by the success of his Little Trailer series. On top of this, he also had a gaming channel in which he would achieve even greater success in terms of subscribers, in spite of a marginally lower view count. Generally, if you ask someone involved with YouTube what has been their most recent experience with him, chances are it'll be the allegations, in which Toby Turner was accused of sexual assault. Now, at the time, this was created in a Tumblr post by an individual named April Fletcher, and this information isn't wholly relevant right now, but I am going to bring it back up in the future for why it is important. Turner had 3 successful channels, had made videos that are pretty much iconic in many people's childhoods, and had so much media branching out in so many different directions, he almost seemed set to succeed. I was rewatching a video in preparation by Foot of a Ferret, in which he runs down the brief history of our good friend Toby here, and he says this.
Only recurring human character in the show. Tobuscus is on top of the world right now. He has millions of fans, 3 huge YouTube channels, a starring role on Cartoon Network, and he even has a video game in development. With all this in mind, I think it's safe to say that the real big years for Toby are still on the way.
So it does indeed beg the question. I'm not entirely sure yet, but by the end of the video, I'm sure we'll have a bit more of a definitive answer. Turner is still uploading content to this day on his channel, mostly more commentary, face cam oriented, and talking about various random topics that interest him. Some topics more trending, others more spontaneous or personal to him. Given the fact that I don't think there's really too much else to summarize in this situation, we're running ahead of schedule. So without further ado, I suggest we get right into it. I think we should open up with a fairly uncontroversial statement. Toby Turner is a talented musician. There is no doubt in my mind about that. He started his Tobuscus channel in 2006, and it did decently. In fact, it did fairly well, particularly for views. Turner's music always had a very distinct style in its delivery. Turner is a guitarist. He's clearly no Van Halen, or else Daddy Derek would have probably wanted his signature, but he didn't need to be, and that's the first thing we need to talk about when it comes to Turner as a curator. Nothing he made was profoundly musically expert, but it didn't need to be. The thing is, back in 2006, YouTube existed on its own terms. Its content creators didn't have state-of-the-art camera work. And I know I've spoken about this before, but if it's a premise, it can't be ignored. Turner's stuff was relatively simple at the time, but it was cute, it was mildly amusing, and Turner could do funny voices.
The intensity, it hurts my vocal cord.
A lot of people tend to point to the Don't Tase Me Bro as one of Turner's earliest successes, but I'm not sure I entirely agree with that. And I'd actually say that a far more representative video is the quaintly named Falcor the Urinator, which is essentially a song about his dog and how it pisses, which fair enough. I feel that as a video, it was a snapshot into what Turner was about to create and how mind-blowingly successful he was about to become. You see, the word meme didn't even begin becoming popularized until the early 2010s, and even then it was a very gradual ascension to the sort of notoriety that it has attained today. But with all this considered, the phrase meme is just a label. Memes existed before the word meme existed. Nowadays, memes are much more seen as general concepts, and we tend to pick up on the most random people. But I think one of the things I'd argue about Turner is that he really did make his music in a very memey fashion. If you go back and look in the comment sections, you'll see numerous people quoting very iconic parts of the song, because they had something unique about them that made them so inherently quotable. What was that exactly though? Generally, I think it was because as a musician he was also a storyteller, which is kind of hard to recognize when you're distracted by the numerous jokes. And maybe this was equally born out of his skits where he would create an arc, even if it was a fairly irrelevant one. But that's what a lot of his music represented, that arc, with a load of punchlines in between, which often yielded from the lines before, thus delivering some sort of comedic emphasis. Combine this with the melodies and the very awkward timing, it seemed to create something humorous and memorable. He would also find comedy in the very simple notion of being literal. Even in his Falcor video, you can see that style.
Urinating on the carpet, napinating on the pee pad, urinating the sofa.
Typically, this would contrast a very simple formula, bringing energy and epicness to something mundane. The song is about a dog who takes a piss and chews up sofas, but suddenly it's become this huge song about the dragon from the never-ending story. Relative success from his remixes, even though they probably didn't give him the greatest persona, and they didn't really necessarily build character. They're really only worth noting from the point of view that they showed Turner's very intuitive nature to the prevailing trends. On the about page of his extremely outdated website, it describes him as a viral marketer / actor, instead of, a YouTuber, which I found rather interesting. But he definitely is very sharp on the direction of trends and working out how to turn them into something that people wanted to see. The remixes themselves weren't really anything particularly groundbreaking in their quality.
Don't tase me, bro! I didn't do anything! What did I do?
But he knew how to put them out there, and he knew how to make it look appealing to the viewer, so you can't fault him for that. So one thing that Turner was always credited for was his clickbait, which I personally don't think is anything on the level of people like Ray William Johnson, but his titling was pretty good and always knew how to mold itself into a prevailing trend. It's also important to note that in spite of his videos doing incredibly well for views, he didn't gain too many subscribers from it, mainly because at this point as a creator, although he definitely had his own brand, he hadn't really integrated anything personal into it that would make people come back consistently for his content. It's a very interesting concept, which is personality. When you subscribe to someone, you typically want to support them. Turner created a very diverse range of content that people were watching mainly for its own virality, which isn't the same as someone subscribing to some twat ranting about whatever YouTuber talking bare shit of recent and giving some opinion to it. Virality doesn't translate into long-term success. Unless you really carve out a niche that only you can fill, for example, like bad lip reading, it's very hard to kickstart a brand. What Turner was doing at this time was something that hadn't quite defined him as the creator that he would soon become. It was also the case because back then there were fewer users on the platform, fewer people people who actually had accounts, so with all that considered, he still did alright. Towards the end of 2009, he was the 73rd most subscribed comedian on the platform, on the grand total of 73,456 subscribers. Oh, how times have changed. But nonetheless, that's still a fraction of what he was about to obtain, and he really did need something to identify his brand with. A lot of his videos were fine enough, but they were fairly sporadic in their tone, and that identifies a problem that I'll probably talk about later. For now, we see Tobuscus in a reasonable position. He's doing well for himself. He has a second and third channel, in which he is enticing many of his current viewers into. At that point, the third channel was just called Toby, but it appears that he never decided to use that one beyond a couple uploads, and then transferred the status of the third channel onto Toby Games. This set up a good dynamic interaction. Another YouTuber who had a similar setup was Shane Dawson, who I've spoken about before. He also had 3 channels, but there was more divergence in how these two characters used their channels, with Turner making the second channel more dedicated to vlogs, with the third becoming his gaming channel. Going back to 2010, Turner wasn't the most successful creator on the platform, with a ruthless scheme of tapping into the most popular pulse and some fairly iconic ideas he was about to be. I think it's time we talk about Phase 2. It is the turn of the decade. The world is changing, and Turner had definitely established something, but he didn't necessarily have that game changer that defined his brand on the Tobuscus channel. He was doing well, but he could do better. We've all been in that position. On the 8th of December 2009, Toby Turner uploaded a literal trailer for the film Clash of the Titans. It basically represented his brand of humor that we'd seen before, but in a form of commentary on a film preview. Generally, I think this one was a bit more focused on the literal side, but it still represented the inception of something and demonstrated why Turner had such a talent for the application of this idea. You see, Turner had a great hold on what I'll brand narrative cohesion. The idea that you can maintain a flow of a video like this, insert the jokes, elicit the audience response while not having to stop the video and say, "Guys, look at my joke." Alongside this, the musical nature of many trailers complemented his very melodic style. His content never had too much of an overbearing personality, and therefore his literal trailers tended to be that perfect balance of something additional without detracting from the source material. It was a transformative experience that didn't lose sight of the content that draws people in, because that is the balance of that sort of content that you need. People will inevitably click on a video for a topic or a concept and decide whether they want to stay for the sake of what the YouTuber is providing in addition to it or not, or if they're providing something wholly original. And this idea of the literal trailer was something that Turner was able to brand as much more quintessentially his. However, this video didn't initially take off, not like some of his other content at least, and other videos that had come out about that time had performed better on his channel. A couple months after, and it had done decently, but nothing was going to necessarily blow up. But like the ruthless viral marketer he was, he probably knew that he had something. Maybe he received an optimistic fan response, or maybe he just had an instinct. So like any trooper, he did a few more, and they did well. They didn't blow up, but they were a good enough indication that he might be onto something here. At the time, he was also doing something known as commercial parodies, which were another good way to really make the most of his comedic timing and the funny voices he could use. It's the sort of content that's pretty casual, but really summed up the mood of YouTube back then. There were a lot of parody channels that could do that low-budget satire. Nowadays, it probably wouldn't fly too high, but I can see the appeal.
Farmville! From milking cows to putting chickens in coops, this game pushes the limits of the imagination. Backwards! Here's a taste of the action.
Now, I want to talk about narrative cohesion back here, because the parody series, although short-lived, did outline something. Toby definitely had a nature to make more mature jokes. Not necessarily sexual, but jokes that you'd have to be somewhat knowledgeable to fully appreciate.
Play Mafia Wars. Duh. If you thought Farmville was exciting, get ready for a ride into the carpal tunnel.
But because they aided the narrative or they worked in the context of the video, whether you saw them as a joke or not didn't matter. You could still relatively understand. It also helped this delivery was quite fast because it didn't linger on the punchlines. Each video was on its journey and the jokes were almost like the pit stops. They enhance the experience, but they don't define it. At the same time, a lot of the jokes that Toby tended to make typically refer to some sort of general human condition, which is always welcome. But there's only so many punchlines behind the sort of Facebook games, and eventually eventually he moved on from these, even though the views they pulled were fairly respectable. With content like the literal trailers, they, in a way, reproduced themselves with the constant run of new trailers that came out. And given how each one of them would be different in a way, he had what seemed to be an endless stream of content that could be covered. He just needed a breakthrough. Now, one of the observations that I made when looking over the previous screen caps of his channel was the clickbait that I had heard some people discuss in the past. Initially, he branded them as just the HD literal trailers, which plays off a very clever ambiguity of the definition of literal, and obviously the fact that many people were looking for HD content back then. But it is extremely successful clickbait. However, when he uploaded the Harry Potter literal trailer and it took off, it appears he did change everything to include the parody phrase in the title. So I mean, you can't really complain too much. Eventually, that became part of the brand. Once again, he's a bit clickbaity, but nothing that I find all that egregious, especially when you look at the climate past and present. As literal trailers themselves, you can see a clear improvement with the Harry Potter video. There are more running jokes, but once again they don't interfere with the flow. I'm eating Cheez-Its right now and I'm trying to work out how to explain why as comedy they worked in the time, but damn, these Cheez-Its are good. White cheddar. White cheddar is really delicious, guys. Alright, focus, James. Remember what I said about Falcor, that skill in being able to contrast the mundane with the epicness. With the literal trailers, it's like that, but amped up to 11. Added on top of the fact that they are parodying something that is already there. You have this pointing out details and being pedantic is a very simple formula, but it worked, particularly on circa 2010 YouTube. Once the literal trailers caught fire, it felt like they launched Tobuscus as a brand beyond just a video. People become attached to the guy behind the content rather than just the individual uploads. And every single one of the videos that he dropped in the moment appeared to bang. And after the success of the Harry Potter video and the follow-up Halo video, the algorithm was poised to launch him into the spotlight with the Assassin's Creed literal trailer, which went absolutely wild in views. At this point, he really had something, but he needed to establish a close relationship with the audience. So one of the series he started up was Cute Win Fail, basically a series where he'd show 3 clips, 1 cute, 1 win and 1 fail, and let the audience decide which they took preference to. I'll let Toby explain in 2010 language what it meant.
Show where videos from 3 different realms of viral compete to become the most epic. But Toby, how do you determine which video is the most epic? I'm glad you asked, guy with crazy hand movements. You decide. The most epic video of the week receives a gold star, and the other 2 are then crushed to smithereens by giant rock stone text. Those videos' lives are in your hands, basically.
One of the people Toby worked with was Jax Films, who is also known for the highly interactive content. And although I can't really confirm whether they were acquainted at this point in their career, I feel this content did echo the sort of attitude of Jack's work and served as a way to try and capitalize on the creative success of his other material by involving his audience more. Once again, you have that with Jack's Films. You have his more creative side and you have his more personal side. Also at the end of literal trailers, he'd have the audience decide which videos were next. It's the sort of thing that is a smart move to do and encourage participation from your viewers. I don't think that any of this is a criticism. In fact, I think it's perfectly reasonable to want to do this, and these videos perform well too. Obviously they weren't doing as well as the trailers, but that content was what he saw himself as promoting a longevity about. He made other videos too, chatting bear shit. You know, the sort of thing that he wanted to do. And in a way, that was in the spirit of 2010's YouTube. It was broadcasting yourself in whatever form possible, and Tobuscus really nailed that. At around the time, Tobuscus also started focusing on his 2 other channels, Toby Turner and Toby Games. Both of these channels didn't do insane numbers on startup, but they had a fan base. Toby Games is the one that is more interesting. He started at the end of 2010, and immediately it seemed to do somewhat decently, initiating with some videos on Halo Reach. However, there was a lot more to come for this channel, and I want to hold on to this thought as we move into Toby's creative renaissance. You see, by the looks of things, his content was doing what it needed to do. He had a lot of creative ideas, he was letting them run riot on YouTube, an array of ventures all over the place, and people were watching them. However, given Turner's sheer spontaneity and his nature to just do whatever he wanted to, it meant that if he was going to do something, no one could really tell. And needless to say, no one was prepared for what was coming next, because 4 words would define many people's lives forever. Nugget in a biscuit.
Whoa! Whoa!
Oh no, copyright, please
Nuggets
stop.
in a biscuit is something that could only be the product of its time. I've explained all the components of Tobuscus and all of his talents, the memes, the music, the tone, the narrative, and all of these come together to create something like Nugget in a biscuit. The sheer peak of creative autonomy. There's no other way to describe it. And that's what often makes the greatest memes and cultural projects, because they are so unbelievably unique that you just can't define them. There's no way to fully explain the moments, but Nugget in a biscuit was one of them. It's a mesmerizing video. What else can be said? Toby also let this ingeniously kick off a new creative venture, which was basically animated Tobuscus. Now this is an animated series voiced predominantly by Turner, and animated by the creator Gonzo SSM. These little skits did really well, but there was still more to them than meets the eye. To understand this, we need to talk about Toby Games, Tobuscus's third channel. Now, it's exceptionally rare for a third channel to have more subscribers than someone's main channel when they provide a high amount of attention to the first channel as well. Obviously, some people might point to Shane Dawson's third channel, but I'd argue that he'd prioritize that over the other two, and thus has made it his main channel in a way. Tobuscus did upload a lot of content to his third channel, and there is no doubt about that. It definitely helped, but his main channel already had a huge head start. How did it catch up? Well, firstly, Toby was an epic gamer, and I mean he gamed every day. The upload schedule on his channel was absolutely insane. He was uploading non-stop, so even when he wasn't pulling the views, it was all cumulative. However, another more interesting detail was how his new animator series tended to revolve around topics related to the games he might be playing. So for example, Tobuscus Animated Adventures was about a trip to Dead Island, a game that he also played on his third channel. Or for example, on November 2011, he updated a significant amount of Minecraft videos on his third channel, and then complemented it on the 25th of November with a Minecraft related song on his main channel. His first channel, in spite of everything else that was going on, was intertwined in games enough to the point that it meant that his third channel really took off on the basis of algorithms and of that audience, even though I'd argue his main channel retrospectively was much more iconic and has videos that were more famous. The content that he released on his gaming channel was more about him as an individual creator. Closer interaction, longer videos, more videos, and the videos themselves were much more focused in their genre. They had an underlying theme, and then people subscribed for that theme, which is likely why eventually the channel accumulated more subscribers, because it was more coherent in its theme, and a lot of the time that's what people subscribed for. These animated videos were much more successful than any other type of video, and with this he integrated it with his musical talent for some very popular content. When it came to his music skills, he had a knack of creating extremely simple melodies and rhythms that were mesmerizing and addictive, often captured Turner's very polarized tone, where he constantly moved between that extremely over-the-top epicness to the very stoic moments, and Gonzo SSM did a great job in capturing that.
Look at little Tim sleeping so soundly. Wake up, Tim! There's a monster!
Animation could capture that sort of energy like no other, so it's no wonder why these videos were so popular with his viewers and many others as well. On top of this, around 2012, he started to branch out into many other forms of YouTube, which is always a resourceful move. At the end of the day, everyone's channel dies. Everyone's channel will have a time where it no longer becomes relevant, and therefore they need to make sure there's a career beyond that. And so he was in a few TV shows, a few films. He'd already featured on his friend Dane Bodekeimer's channel, The Annoying Orange. Yeah, that gem. Turner was a laborious marketer with a lot of ideas. However, in many situations, it would be easy to accuse him of jumping from trend to trend in a rather disingenuous fashion. How could someone have a passion for that many topics? What makes him stand out from that criticism? Firstly, a lot of his successful content clearly has a lot of personality, and does carry through that energy that can root his content in that draw. With that said, his content was never really fueled by his personality, but more by his talents to apply them to was as a person, well, you'd have trouble defining at least that character from Tobuscus. He's clearly sharp and witty, but that's an energy captured by particular circumstances. With someone like Shane Dawson, you have a very particular character portrait that's been constructed by his content. Turner's content may well be abstracted from his character, but it's so comically inclined that it's very hard to say anything about who he is. Who is Toby Turner as a person? It leaves you with his gaming channel and his vlog channel. The latter one we haven't talked about for reasons that we'll discuss very soon, but the gaming channel I think was very well built on the games themselves. And make no mistake, Toby clearly has a talent and a knack, but gaming as a genre has become a lot more restricted in the last few years, and less focusing on the attitudes of the people playing them, and more about relative skill or excellent clickbait, or playing with Drake. Unless you're CSGO surfing, of course, then all you need to do is put some reaction commentary about Daniel Bergoli over it and suddenly it becomes fine art. Toby was just a gamer, and that was one of the things. Although his creative ventures were certainly unique, he didn't have anything that made the gaming videos stick out. Although he was by no means unfunny or lacking in entertainment value, he equally was just as good as the culture in its time, and that culture quickly became hostile to a lot of YouTube gamers. Which is where we reach his vlog channel, because his vlog channel was easily his least popular channel, and although it had a significant amount of subscribers and a lot of uploads, not many of them did particularly well. And even if you arrange it in his most popular order, you have to go through 8 videos to find firstly a vlog, but also one that isn't misleading in its title. Looking at you, Selena Gomez and Justin Bieber. And watching the vlogs, they're just not anything that I would brand as captivating. Toby Turner wasn't necessarily made for the vlogging game in my opinion, and the reason is that I feel that a lot of his videos felt inconsequential. Even for creators who I personally don't like, such as Zoella, their videos always felt like they had a purpose or a reason to be there, even if I personally think that purpose was rather forced. It still felt like they were always going somewhere. I just never received that impression from Turner's work. On top of this, the vlogs never felt like they were fully Toby. It always felt like he was holding something back. And what we really need is someone expressing themselves in that situation. No one could ever get the full picture. We knew who Tobuscus was, but we didn't really know Toby Turner. But that was all right. It just meant that he may not be cut out for one sort of artistic venture. It just meant he had a brand to preserve. But doing something like that in a changing environment is much easier said than done.
Alright.
You see, I mentioned a couple people in this video today, Dawson and Jack's Films. The reason that I did this is because they, both as creators, are still going relatively strong to this day and still make videos that generate a ton of views. And therefore there must be something that distinguishes themselves and has allowed them to succeed where Turner has fallen short. And don't worry, we'll address the elephant in the room soon enough. But by now it should be clear that the gaming channel, as good as it may have been back in the day, didn't really have the power to survive. The success of the gaming channel was at a peak where his sort of supplementary character was considered an enhancement by audiences, and now that sort of persona was just no longer considered cool. No longer can a large YouTuber just set up a games channel and expect it to do